Whenever I have tomatoes at home, I always make this tomato preserve. To start our recipe, grab a ripe tomato and make small holes all over it using the tip of a fork. For this recipe, use about 2 pounds of ripe tomatoes and after piercing them thoroughly, place them in a glass jar. Repeat the same process, poking all the tomatoes with the tip of the fork. After piercing and placing all the tomatoes in the glass jar, pour in the hot water that you already boiled. It's important to use a glass jar that can handle the heat of the hot water. Add enough water to cover all the tomatoes, just like I'm doing here. Once you've added the water, put on the lid, close the jar, and let it sit for 15 minutes. Make sure the water fully covers the tomatoes so they stay well preserved. 15 minutes have passed. Now drain all the water out. After draining the water, add 4 heaping tablespoons of sugar. Once you learn this recipe, you'll only want to eat tomatoes this way. Stir the sugar well so that it completely dissolves among the tomatoes. Next, add 4 tablespoons of grated garlic. After adding the garlic, mix thoroughly to spread it evenly throughout all the tomatoes. I'm using grated garlic, but you can also use crushed or minced garlic as long as it's finely processed. After adding the grated garlic, pour in white vinegar to add even more flavor to our tomatoes. Here, I'm using 2 tablespoons of white vinegar. Then, add hot water again until all the tomatoes are covered. Whenever I make this tomato preserve and use it in my dishes, my family loves it. It's a simple recipe, but the result is always delicious and adds a special touch to any meal. After adding enough water to completely cover the tomatoes, seal the jar and let it rest for 24 hours. Our tomato preserve is ready. 24 hours have passed. Now, open the jar and take the tomatoes out of the preserve, draining a bit of the water. I'll remove them and place them on a plate to show how our tomatoes turned out. The tomatoes have absorbed all the flavors from the preserve and are ready to be enjoyed. I made the recipe with large tomatoes, but if you prefer to use smaller ones or cherry tomatoes, that works great too. This is the best recipe you'll learn today. It's truly delicious. Look, now I'm going to cut a tomato to show how soft it is inside. This recipe is perfect for those who like to add a special touch to their dishes. This preserve is delicious, and you can store it in the fridge. It won't spoil. Don't throw away the water from the jar because it keeps our tomatoes flavorful. You can also use this water as a base for sauces or other tasty seasonings. This preserve is perfect for adding a special touch to salads, pasta, and even sandwiches. If you like, you can also add fresh herbs like basil or oregano to intensify the flavor even more. The longer the tomatoes stay in the preserve, the more flavorful they become, soaking up even more taste and becoming even more delicious.